Father, thank you for this evening and your goodness to us as always, how great you are, how good you are to us, Lord. Thank you for your kindnesses while we walk upon this earth. May we glorify you in every way, honor you in every way, and give all that belongs to you in your name. Lord, I would ask that you open up our hearts to your word and your word to our hearts this evening. In your name we pray. Amen. The rest of us are going to be in Leviticus. Leviticus 12. Okay. Remember, when you have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, that is the foundation of the Old Testament. The other prophets, when they would call Israel to repentance, it was always go back to the law of Moses, go back to those early documents. And so Israel was very familiar with this, and everything you see in here gets played out through the Old Testament and also through the New Testament. Like we're going to hit the part of leprosy today, and you see lepers in the Old Testament, you see them in the New Testament as well. And also they go into great detail showing the priest and the people how to recognize something like leprosy, what it is and what it isn't, right? The difference between that and some kind of a eczema or skin disease, okay? So we're going to go to chapter 12. So Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel. When a woman gives birth and bears a male child, she shall be unclean for 7 days, as in the days of her menstruation, when she will be unclean. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised, and then she will remain in the blood of her purification for 33 days. She shall not touch anything that's holy. Okay, no, nor shall she enter into the holy place," that'd be the sanctuary, "until the days of the purification are complete." Now, it's not like she can't be around, but she just can't touch anything or anybody. Anything holy would include the holy people, etc. Now, remember, these are shadows and types. They're not realities. They're going to be teaching things, including it's not that which goes into a man that defiles him. It's that which what comes out of him. Okay, so there's a picture of that. But if she bears a female child, then she will be unclean for 2 weeks, as in her menstruation, and she shall remain in the blood of her purification for 60 days, and then she'll be clean. This is just a ritual, etc. So that we see that Mary, when she gives birth to Jesus Christ, the time of his circumcision, and etc., he's there in Jerusalem. She's there with Joseph, so she's out and about, so she can't touch anybody. Okay. Now, ladies in their culture wouldn't touch a male anyway. They for sure they would not do that. They were less touchy than we are, except in their greetings when they would greet. But in that culture, never would a man greet a woman. Men would greet each other with a holy kiss on the cheek or something like that. The French do that to this day. The ladies, etc. Do you remember the woman at the well? When the apostles showed back up, the disciples showed back up, and they saw this conversation going on with him and the Samaritan woman, what shocked them? You remember what it was? The fact that he was talking to a female, right? In that culture, men did not, you just didn't do that, particularly if you did not know them, right? All right, so we have this ritual here, etc. Okay, now when the days of her purification are completed, for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring it to the priest at the doorway of the tent of meeting, a 1-year-old lamb and burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a wandering turtle dove. The word means just a bird that wanders around, for sin. And he will offer it before Yahweh, and atone for her, or cover for her, and she shall be cleansed from the flow of blood. And this is the law of her who bears a child, a male or a female. If she cannot afford a lamb, then she shall take 2 turtle doves, these wandering birds, or 2 young pigeons, and the one for an ascender, and the other for sin. And the priest will make a covering or atonement for her, and she shall be clean. Okay, so you get the idea. Now, there's a story, you have a story in the New Testament, in the Gospel. Do you remember the woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years? When she was pressing through the crowd, what was she doing to everybody she touched? Defiling. She defiled them, ritually, right? That's all it was, ritual, this shadow and type, okay? By the way, the shadow and type is, there are things within us that come out of us that we pass on to others, etc. And Paul said, you can't live to yourself and you can't die to yourself. You don't do that because it's not possible, okay? If I'm defiled, I'm defiling everything I touch, right? Get the idea. So that gal who's pressing through that crowd, it's interesting. If I can just touch the hem of his garment or the tassel or something like that, right? She wouldn't touch him. So she's kind of half in the game and half out of the game. Okay? But pushing through a crowd and doing that, and when she did that, I found that fascinating that Jesus, he felt power go out of him. I think he had a dizzy spell, just wow. Because God took something from the Son of God and gave it to her. Gave her health. How? By taking it from him and taking her weakness and giving it to him. And some of the descriptions through here, it's actually just the Hebrew word for her for this. It's a time of her uncleanness. It could be just literally the time of her weakness, her sickness or her weakness. And again, the female body takes a little bit of time to heal up again after giving birth, etc. All right. So in Luke 2:21, days were fulfilled so that they could not they could circumcise him. His name was called Jesus, the name given to the angel before he conceived in the womb. So that was 8 days keeping that. And of course, circumcision, the sign of the covenant with Abraham, right? Abraham covenant. And literally, the blood here in Hebrew is called the blood of her cleansing. That is, her body is actually still cleansing itself after giving birth to a child. She can't touch anything that's holy. She can be out and about a little bit, but she's got to be very, very careful, okay? All right, so they brought Jesus Christ in. They presented him to the Lord, as written in the law of the Lord. Every firstborn male that opens womb will be called holy to the Lord. And they offered up a sacrifice according to that was said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 pigeons. Now, it's interesting. If it's in her hand to offer up a lamb, she has to do that. If she's considered poor, she can go to the pigeons. If she's really poverty, she can offer up a handful of flour. Okay. So when Joseph and Mary show up at the temple, they offer up the birds of the poor. They're very poor. Okay. The birds, of course, represent this heavenly glory, these heavenly creatures that have come down, very symbolic of the one who's going to come down. Oftentimes, when these birds are mentioned, they'll be part of the same sacrifice. Sometimes you'll kill one bird over the top of the other with the water and the blood of one flowing over and giving life to the other, and he gets released out into the field, etc. Get the idea in the pictures. When they will strip his feathers off, it's a picture of taking his glory and stripping it. And again, Jesus Christ will be stripped of his heavenly glory. All right, let's go to chapter 13 here. Now, this chapter is an incredible chapter, in my opinion. Okay, the word for leprosy is sarah, and it means a scourge. You guys know what scourging is, right? Okay, and so a leper is facing scourging. Okay, as his skin rots off of his body while he is alive. In the Old Testament, a leper is seen as a living, breathing, walking, dead man. He is dead. Because just like you put a body into the ground and it rots the flesh off the corpse, right? This man is walking around, literally, and being rotted off of him in the same exact way. So he's seen as a dead man. For example, okay, do you remember when Miriam was complaining about Moses because he married an Ethiopian gal? Okay. By the way, have you guys seen Ethiopians? They're charcoal black. Okay. So he marries this charcoal black woman. Okay. Miriam and Aaron make an issue of it, and God, it says, struck her with leprosy, snow white. You see what's going on? Okay. And because Aaron and her dad said, we're prophets too. We have some say with this, etc. And when they did that, God struck her with leprosy. Snow white, that's very advanced leprosy. Okay. And then Aaron pleaded for her in Numbers 12:12. Do not let her be like one who is dead, whose flesh is half eaten away when he comes from his mother's womb. This is right. If a baby's half eaten up when he comes from his mother's womb, that baby's dead. Okay. You get the idea. So she's like a leper. She's considered dead. She has to be put out of the camp. She can't be around anybody, etc. Okay. We'll come back to that a little bit later. Okay. Now, if you have a Bible, look at 2 Kings 5. A story you'll be familiar with. Story of Naaman. Okay. How many lepers in the Old Testament were healed, do you think? Okay. First leper I know anything about was Moses. Moses, the first leper. Did you know that? Put his hand in his bosom, brought it out. What was all over his hand? Leprosy. Where did it come from? Inside of him. Right? Where's the scourging in my life coming from? Inside of me. Etc. And what's the symbolism of the hand? What I'm doing? Why am I doing the things that dead men do? Because it's coming from inside of me. He put it back in, and God was able to heal it and fix it. And that's pretty much the gospel of Jesus Christ, that you're a dead man on the inside. The scribes and Pharisees, you guys are full of dead men's bones. You're just a walking corpse, is all you are. Okay? Ephesians 2, you were dead in your trespasses and sin, in which you walked according to the course of this age and course of this world, right? We're walking dead men. Those would be lepers, all right? And 2 Kings 5. Now Naaman is the captain of the army of the king of Aram. And he was a great man with his master and highly respected, because by him Yahweh had given victory to Aram. Now notice, the king of Aram does not know Yahweh had given him victory through this man. Yahweh himself is raising up Naaman because he has a future for him. Okay? And the man also was a valiant warrior, but he was a leper. And also notice their cultures are different. And Naaman, though he's a leper, he's out among the people, even touching people. Okay? God's people are not to be touching that, not to come in contact with it. Now, when the Arameans had gone out in bands, they had taken a captive a little girl from the land of Israel. And she waited on Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, I wish that my master were with the prophet who's in Samaria. Then he would cure him of his leprosy. Naaman went in and he told his master, saying, Thus spoke this girl who's from the land of Israel. By the way, sounds of desperation, doesn't it? Some kid talking about, oh yeah, they could heal leprosy. Oh, right. Then the king of Aram said, Go now, I'll send a letter to the king of Israel. He departed, he took with him 10 talents of silver and 6,000 shekels of gold, 10 changes of clothes. These would be royal type robes, very, very expensive clothing. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, And now, as this letter comes to you, behold, I have sent Naaman, my servant, to you, that you would cure him of his leprosy. And it came about when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes. He said, Am I God to kill and make alive? Right? This man, he's a leper, he is a dead man, and I cannot make him alive. I am not God. Why is he tearing his clothes? Well, he tells you, this man is sending word for me to cure a man of leprosy. Consider now and see how he's seeking a quarrel against me. We're about to go to war, and this man is using this for this reason. But you'll notice, again, a leper is considered a dead man, and men are not able to do that. Jesus uses Naaman. How many people were healed in the Old Testament of their leprosy? Well, it wasn't very common. And it happened when Elisha, the man of God, heard the king of Israel had torn his clothes, and he sent word to the king, saying, Why have you torn your clothes? Now, let him come to me, and you're going to know that there's a prophet in Israel. It never dawned on the king. The northern kingdom, when they split, they never had a good king. And Samaria, it means fortification, is what it means. But anyway, he's king there, and he is clueless. The kings of the north acknowledges Yahweh sometimes, and they don't acknowledge Yahweh sometimes. They're hit and miss, right? And by the time they're all said and done, they didn't know who Yahweh was. Now Naaman came with his horses and his chariots, and he stood at the doorway of the house of Elisha. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored to you, and you're going to be clean. Now, you'll see what's going on here. Elisha's not going to come out to be exposed to him. Just go tell him this, okay? Here's a great general, right? Very powerful man, prominent man. And Naaman was furious. And God had just hit him right where it matters. That is his pride. He went away and he said, Behold, I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call upon the name of Yahweh his God, wave his hand over one place and cure the leper. He's going to, kind of thing. Yeah. He's not going to do any of that. This is humiliating. That dirty Jordan is, in many places, the Jordan River is more like one of the canals that you would see around here, right? Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and he went away in a rage. He's been humiliated. Right? By the way, well, the Bible will talk about the dangers of the raging Euphrates. That would be the Babylonians, because the Euphrates, when the Euphrates came over the land of Israel, there was the Babylonian invasion. And so rivers would represent nations and things like that. But this is key. The Jordan River comes from Mount Hermon. And from Mount Hermon, there's snow year-round up there. And Mount Hermon is called the mountain of the Lord, the mountain of Yahweh. You understand? And this is a humble little river. It's not a grand river. And for him to be told, yes, Yahweh's river is just this, and you're going to have to humble yourself before Yahweh. And he's furious. Then his servant came near, and he spoke to him, and he said, my father, had the prophet told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, wash and be clean? Go take a bath. He went down, he dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan. You guys know that number 7. According to the word of the man of God. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. This man has a body restored completely, like Moses had his hand restored from that leprosy as well. Okay. He returned to the man of God with all his company, and he came and he stood before him. He said, behold, now I know. What does he know now? That there is no God in all the earth except Israel. I know all the pagan gods are false. They're all fakes. So please, take a present from your servant. Now he said, as Yahweh lives, here's an oath, before whom I stand. I swear to God, I will take nothing. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. Now Naaman said, if not, let your servant at least be given 2 mules loads of earth, soil. For your servant will no more offer burnt offerings, nor will he sacrifice to any other gods, because they aren't gods, okay, but to Yahweh. And again, these nations and the very soil of these nations represented their gods. And so that when the Babylonians, remember when they conquered Israel, they took the things of the temple and put them in the temple, their pagan temples, right? To show that their gods were more powerful than these gods, etc. And so part of that soil that Yahweh is worshipped on the soil of Israel. So he's going to take a couple of bags of dirt and be like, he's in Israel. And in this manner, may Yahweh pardon your servant when my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon. When I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, may Yahweh pardon your servant for this matter. The pagan god, I have this ritual things that I'm going to have to do. He said to him, go with shalom. Everything is well between you and Yahweh. So he departed from him for some distance. Now Gehazi, talk about Gehazi. Ge is land, and Hazi is to have a vision, the land of vision. So he's actually named for this land. Okay? When the servant of Elisha, the man of God, by the way, Elisha is God restores. What had just happened to him? That he was restored, because Elisha is the type of Christ. Okay? Man of God, he thought, behold, my master has spared Naaman the Aramean by not receiving from his hands what he brought. As Yahweh lives, there's that Hebrew oath again. And now Elisha says, Yahweh lives, I won't touch it. As Yahweh lives, I'm going to run after him. I'm going to take some things from him. So Gehazi pursued Naaman. When Naaman saw one running after him, he came down from his chariot to meet him. And he said, is all well? He said, all is well. My master has sent me, saying, behold, just now 2 men of the sons of the prophets have come. These would be 2 Bible students have just showed up, and they've come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Now, please give them a talent of silver. That'd be a great round wheel of it, and 2 changes of clothes. This is a haul, by the way. Naaman said, please to take 2 talents of silver, not just 1. Here's him and bound 2 talents of silver into the bags, and 2 changes of clothes. And he gave them to that servant, and he carried them before him. He came to the hill, he took them in their hands, and they deposited them in their house, and sent men away, and they departed. Oh, goodness. And he went in and he stood before his master. Elisha said to him, where have you been, Gehazi? He said to him, your servant went nowhere. Got a pattern of lying going on, doesn't he? This is not one lie. This is many. Reminds me of Judas Iscariot. He said to him, did not my heart go with you when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Is this a time to receive? Now he's going to tell you what he's after. Money, to receive clothes. And what's he after? And the olive groves that you can purchase with the money, and the vineyards, and the sheep, and the oxen, and the male and the female slaves. You did this to set yourself up for life. Therefore, the leprosy of Naaman shall cleave to you, to your descendants forever. And so he went out from his presence, a leper as white as snow. Let me tell you something. Before Naaman was healed, if he's advanced leprosy, right, he's white, like snow from his leprosy. He's a dead man. That's the imagery of the scriptures. He's a walking, breathing dead man, as we are before we come to know Christ, right? What do you think's happened with everything he's been handling? He's transferring. We're going to see that here shortly when he talks about leprosy can get in your clothing. It can get in, if you have some dishes made of leather, because they did in those days, it can get in the leather. You have to burn those things. It can get in the walls, the plaster on your house. And if it gets really severe, you got to tear your house down. They tear it down literally stone by stone, and the stones have to be hauled away to get rid of it. It's a deadly. You're highly contagious, and you will kill everything that you touch, right? Now, Naaman's been handling this stuff, and he's giving it to him. This stuff's got leprosy all over it. And so they grab it and take it. Now, there's more to the story because obviously God is the one that makes this advance on him. Okay? He's white as snow. Just like Miriam was. Let me show you something. He's going to describe leprosy in the next couple of chapters of Leviticus. As he does so, it's like the manna. The manna was a literal bread out of a literal heaven, but also a type and a picture of Jesus, the bread of life coming down from heaven. So, leprosy is a real disease, but it also is an illustration of men who are dead in their trespasses and sin. That man is waiting to die, a second death, right? He's already dead. He's going to die a second death, as we are as well. Excuse me. Right? What a horrible thing that he did, all for greed. And I'm sure he's going back with a smile on his face, saying, man, I just got the ranch. I got everything I need the rest of my life. I am set. Well, that's one way of looking at it, okay? But what do you do with a leper? And God will even describe how a leper is going to get healed. Nobody ever was healed except Naaman. And it tells me that it's prophetic of the one who's going to come and deal with that, okay? Do you remember after the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus came down and met a leper, and the leper, he's got to stand afar off because he can't come near. And he said, if you wanted to, Lord, you could make me clean. And Jesus said, I want to. And then he walked up and hugged him. What? By the way, Luke says it was advanced, like this white as snow advanced type stuff, right? He said it was very advanced, okay? If it's advanced, and he can't touch anybody, when was the last time anybody touched him? What do you think it felt like? He hasn't touched anybody in years. Right? Haven't been around anybody in years. And Jesus walks up and gives him a bear hug. My goodness. Remember the 10 who were standing afar off and calling to him, Lord, go show yourself to the priest, etc., because that's the proper way to do this. I think Jesus is fulfilling these things here, okay? And again, you can see the pagan king of Aram, he's willing to touch a leper and do those kind of things. Okay. Now, by the way, chapters 13 and 14, these are the chapters that healed the Dark Ages. I don't know if you know that or not. In the Dark Ages, the plague came, and when the plague came, everybody was dying, and they did not know what to do because everybody was dirty and filthy. All right? So finally, one of the most amazing stories, they bolted the monasteries shut because they didn't want any people in there because of the plague. Well, the people were bringing offerings to God because if they give offerings to God, God might heal them of their leprosy. Well, they won't let them in and they won't touch the money because they think the money's unclean. So pretty soon the people on the outside take it was coins in those days, didn't have paper money, so they took their coins and threw them over the wall. Well, everybody inside the wall thought this is contaminated money, so they'll go over there and they're throwing the money back over the top of the wall. So you've got cash going over the. I just thought that was a hysterical story. Anyway, so they didn't know what to do. So all the princes, etc., they came to the church and the church leaders and said, what do we do? And they went to these chapters that we're about to look into if we get through the introduction. But anyway, they came to these chapters and it was all about quarantining. As long as you separate that man, you can quarantine that man. And that ended not the dark ages, but it ended the plague where 1/3 to 1/2 of the continent of Europe died. I've read documents about the people that were there writing in those days. Whole towns disappeared. Every last man, woman, and child died. Just to a man. In times of evil, we need to understand that we serve a God who is a lion and he bites. Our God is a consuming fire. And we've seen what happens when Miriam smarts off and God strikes her. And Aaron, the high priest Aaron, please have mercy on her. Don't let her be as a dead person. And God told him, if her dad was spit in her face, she'd have to be quarantined. Get her out of the camp. Now you look at that and you think, this is the God of the Bible. That sounds harsh. That's not harsh. God is showing her what's inside of her and her bitterness and her evil hearts. Okay, He could do the same thing with me and the same thing with any of us. So God's used Naaman for these victories that set him up to get Naaman to Israel. But he's got to know about it, so they capture the little girl and they take her there. And she does that. You see how God behind the scenes in this whole thing? I say behind the scenes, He's right in the thick of the scenes, right? He's working in Him. I find this fascinating. Let's go back to Leviticus 13. Okay. So our symbolism, we've got it down. He just says leprosy, dead person. Rotting flesh like a corpse rotting in the ground. Dead person. Okay. Can anybody be healed? Well, nobody was in the Old Testament in the way that God wanted to be healed to be seen by the priest. So this section is going to be like, not like, but a prophetic thing of Jesus Christ when he comes here. Okay. Yahweh spoke to Moses and to Aaron and says, when a man has on the skin of his body a swelling or a lifting up or a scab and a bright spot. Sometimes the word for bright and the word white, levon, and another word even, will be the same term. It's white, bright white. It becomes an infection of leprosy, and again, a scourging leprosy, because this man is in deep trouble and he's in a lot of pain. On the skin of his flesh, then he shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of the sons of the priest. Now watch what happens in Israel. Remember what Israel is doing. If you do this my way, God said, none of these diseases will be on you. You won't, as a nation, you won't be facing these plagues and things like that. Okay? And the issue is going to be, it's on the flesh. And here, somebody's bringing this person. If you have even a scab, it has to be brought to the priest to make sure that you're okay, right? So you are constantly washing and you are constantly aware of defilement, whether you're clean or unclean. But clean and unclean, like with the ladies giving birth to children, or the foods, or skinning your knees, or it's all the shadows and types. You get the idea. So it's the shadows and type of these heavenly realities, these spiritual realities. Okay. So the priest shall look at the mark on the skin of the flesh, and the hair in the infection. If it is turned white, and the infection appears to be deeper than the skin, like it goes down below skin level of his body, it's an infection of scourging leprosy. When the priest had looked at him, he will pronounce him unclean. The word pronounced not there, literally, the priest will unclean him. That's his position right there, okay? And by the way, these priests, when he does this, you're out of the community. You can't shop at Walmart. You can't be going to the schools. You must live alone. Okay? And by the way, this is fascinating to me. You're going to have to live alone. And leprosariums, there are leprosariums today where the lepers gather, but in those days it could be caves, rocks, anywhere they're going to do that, because if the leprosy gets inside the walls of your house, they're going to tear your house down. And by the way, does leprosy, if you're a dead man, you have leprosy in you, you've never met Christ, and that means you're a leper, right? He says, can your leprosy and your sin and your death get inside the very walls of your home and your family? Yes, they can. You're destroying your family. right? And he's going to describe those who get leprosy only on the head. You get the idea? He's brain dead. This guy's insane. He thinks ways of dead men, right? Verse 4, that bright spot is white on the skin of his flesh. If it doesn't appear to be deeper than the skin, the hair on it is not turned to white, then the priest will isolate him who has that infection for 7 days. We're not sure. What do? We isolate him. What does a counselor do? What does a pastor do when somebody comes in and you're not quite sure what you're recognizing? And well, we wait, patiently wait. And the priest will look at him on the 7th day, and if in his eyes that infection has not changed and the infection has not spread, literally the spreading has not spread on the skin of the flesh, and the priest will isolate him for 7 more days. So at the end of that week, he looks okay. It's all stopped, because if it's leprosy, he uses the word literally, it's alive. That death is alive in him and on him. Okay. By the way, Colossians 3, put to death the sins of your flesh, right? Because what lives on the flesh? Leprosy. Put it to death. These are deeds of people who don't know the Lord. Deeds of men who are dead. Put those things to death. Okay. The priest will look at him again on the 7th day, and if the infection has faded, lowered, calmed down, and the mark or the scab is not spread on the skin, then the priest will pronounce him clean. It's only a scab. He has to wash his clothes and be clean. But now notice, it's only a scab, but we didn't know that before. And so what are we going to do? We're going to wait and see. We can't always tell. Because the guy may look like he's just skinned his knee, but he's a dead man. Or he's a very unclean man. But he may also look like a dead man or a very unclean man. He's not. There's nothing wrong. He's got eczema or he's got something pretty minor. It's not a big deal. Okay. If the scab spreads further on the skin, he will show himself to the priest for his cleansing, and he will appear again to the priest. And the priest will look, and if the scab is spread on the skin, then the priest will pronounce him unclean. It's leprosy. When the infection of leprosy is on this man, then he will be brought to the priest. And the priest will then look, and if there is a white swelling on that skin, and it has turned the hair white, there's a quick raw flesh. The word for raw is the word alive. It's living flesh in the swelling. If it is chronic leprosy on the skin of his flesh, the priest will pronounce him unclean. He will not, and then he will not isolate him because he is unclean. Isolation was for checking him out. A week later, there's nothing to check out. We're done. Okay? Interesting. In the New Testament, remember in 1 Corinthians 5, there's a man who is being immoral. He is to be put out of the assembly. He cannot be among you. And at that case, you don't need 2 or 3 witnesses. Paul says it's already well known. We've gone far. This has gone far enough. Just remove him. Now, the leprosy, if it breaks out further on the skin, the leprosy covers all the skin on him who is the infection from his head even to his feet. That'd be a horrible thought. As far as the priest can see. So when you get the idea, when Jesus saw these men with advanced leprosy, what we're looking at, right? It's horrible. It's a horrible thing. Then that priest will look, and behold, the leprosy has covered all of his body, all of his flesh. And you'll pronounce him who has the infection. It is all turned white, and he is clean. Now, if he looks at him and the leprosy's covered his body, but he's pronounced him already because he has the infection, turned out the white that he is clean. So it's not everything that looks like leprosy is leprosy. And whenever raw flesh appears on him, he shall be unclean. That is, it's alive. And the priest will look at the living flesh, alive, the flesh that's alive, pronounce him unclean. The raw flesh, the living flesh, is unclean. It is leprosy. And again, this guy's going to be in torment. This stuff's going to get to him. Okay. By the way, people working in leprosariums, it's called Hansen's disease today. But what it does is it begins to affect, as he's saying, what you're seeing, live flesh, okay? And then things begin to ooze out of his body. And if you're around him, you can smell it, okay? It begins to affect his vocal cords, and he has a harshness to him. Okay, God's describing the sinner, isn't he? Right? You can smell him. You can hear him. Okay, goes on. If you're around him long enough, it says those who work this, they begin to taste them. That's disgusting, and it's gross, right? Why? Because he's a dead corpse. That's what's going on. He's literally rotting. You'll notice he's rotting from the inside out, however. Or if the living flesh, raw living flesh, turns again and it changes to white, he shall come to the priest, and the priest will look at him, and behold, if the infection has turned white, then the priest will pronounce him clean. He has that infection, he is clean. Now, when the body has a burning boil, is the idea, it's a word for hot, a hot boil, it's burning the guy, on its skin, and it is healed in the place of the boil that there is a white swelling or a reddish white. By the way, these words for white and reddish are going to be the word for bright white and bright red. Okay? If you take Adam means red, it's the color of the soil that he came from. Adam, red. Okay? If you double it, Adam, okay? Bright red. Okay? Just that simple. Okay. In the place of the boil, there's a white swelling in the reddish white bright spot. Then it will be shown to the priest. Okay. And again, can he pronounce himself clean? No. Somebody else has to do that. Okay. Now the priest will look, and behold, if it appears to be lower than the skin, it's like a valley or an impression in his flesh, and the hair on it has turned white, then the priest will pronounce him unclean. It is the infection of leprosy. It is broken out in the boil. But if the priest looks at it, and there's no white hairs in it, and it's not lower than the skin, and it's faded, then the priest will isolate him for 7 days. Now, he doesn't see the signs of leprosy, he says, but that doesn't mean we're in the clear yet. Let's wait and see. Okay? Let's wait and see. You guys have seen that when you're around a Christian, a man or a woman who claims to be a Christian, you think, something's not right here. You know what I'm saying, right? It appears to be unclean. I'm not sure. I'm not positive. What do? You wait. It'll spread. It'll get worse as time goes on. Okay? You know, when my grandson was little, we could not let him watch any of the series that had Darth Vader in it. Do you remember Darth Vader? Because he would have nightmares. Okay? As time went on, he grew up into his teens and things. How afraid of Darth Vader do you think he was? He wasn't. Right? Sin is one of those things that when you get stronger, certain things fall away, and because he didn't have the inner strength to deal with that when he was little, but he did later on. Okay, what happens with sin is when you're young, you may not have the inner strength to participate in very vile things, but that's because you're young, and you're going to grow, and you're going to get stronger and stronger and stronger, and find yourself doing things one day that you never thought you'd do. And it's the same for others as well. It will, because the sin inside of you, the death inside of you is alive, and it's spreading. Okay? And it's going to get you, right? Unless the hope of the gospel, and Jesus Christ deals you with that and heals you from the inside out. Right? The priest will look at it and behold, if there are no white hairs in it, and he's not lowered in the skin and it's faded, and the priest will isolate him for 7 days, because we're not sure yet. If it spreads farther on the skin, then that priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an infection. It's spreading. It's alive. It's moving. Okay? If the bright spots remain in its place and does not spread, it is only the scar of the boil. And that priest shall pronounce him clean. Okay? Or if the body sustains in its skin a burn by fire, and the raw flesh, the living flesh of that burn becomes a bright spot, reddish white or white, then the priest will look at it, and if the hair in the bright spot has turned white, and it appears to be deeper than the skin, it's leprosy. So we're looking for hair inside of it. The hair is a bright white. There is living flesh, and it's bright red, and it's made an indentation into his body because it's eating down, right? It's inside of him, and it's eating him, kind of thing like that. Now, you could have skin needs and scabs and different other things, but he's saying, make the discernment here and use this as your guide. These aren't doctors, but they're using this as their guide. Okay, some of God's people, when you meet them, they look very rough, and later on you find, man, this guy would die for you. And my observation, not 100%, but some of the nicest guys that I've ever met in Christianity are the worst scoundrels. They are nicer than God, nicer than Jesus Christ. How is that possible? Okay? What I mean by that? Well, most people that you know, most of your family members, we're kind of rough around the edges, aren't we? All of us are a little rough. Okay? And when you meet somebody who has no rough edges, how? Because it's normal to have rough edges. It's normal to have rough edges. Okay. That is broken out in the burn. Therefore, that priest will pronounce him unclean if the infection is that of leprosy. So sometimes we need to wait, quarantine them in your mind, or say, I'll meet with you later. We'll come back and see what's going on. Is it getting worse, etc. If the priest looks at it, and indeed there's no white hair in that bright spot, and there's no deeper than this, not deeper in the skin, but it's dimming, right? It's going softer, calmer. Then the priest will isolate him for 7 days. Now notice it appears he doesn't have leprosy, but let's wait and see. Then the priest will look at him on the 7th day. If it spreads further in the skin, then the priest will pronounce him unclean. I wasn't sure, but now I'm sure, and it is an infection of leprosy. If that bright spot remains in its place, then he will not, it hasn't spread on his skin, but is dim. It is the swelling from the burn, and the priest will pronounce him clean. It's only a scar of the burning. Okay? And again, how many of us are going to get scabs and scars going through life, right? Anybody working construction, anybody working out in the fields, and that's pretty much everybody. And so you can see that after a while, you're going to have a long line of people going regularly. You're going to have the priest. Okay. By the way, it doesn't say you have to be at the temple, but because the priest cities, you couldn't in Israel. If I remember correctly, do you remember the cities of refuge and the cities of the priests? Right. You couldn't be further than about 40 miles from one of those cities. Okay. So you're not far to go check things out here. Verse 29, if a man or a woman has an infection in the head or on the beard, that literally is on the head or the face, etc., okay, then the priest will look at the infection, and if it appears to be deeper than the skin, and there is thin yellowish hair in it, then that priest will pronounce him unclean. It is a scale, it is leprosy of the head or of the beard, because it can cling alive to your beard like it's eating it. Eating the drywall off your house is deadly stuff. If the priest looks at the infection of the scale, and indeed it appears to be deeper than the skin, no deeper than the skin, and there's no black hair in it, then that priest will isolate that person with the scaly infection for 7 days. Now this is interesting because he has the things on his body that are required to identify it as leprosy, but it doesn't look like leprosy, right? We'll quarantine him. We'll wait and see. Okay? On the 7th day, that priest will look at the infection, and if the scale has not spread, and there's no yellowish hair has grown in it, and the appearance of the scale is no deeper than the skin, then he will shave himself, and he will not shave the scale, that is, go around it with a razor, and the priest will isolate that person with the scale for 7 more days. Then on the 7th day, that priest will look at the scale, and if the scale on his skin does not spread in his flesh, and it appears no deeper than the skin, the priest will pronounce him clean. And he will wash his clothes and be clean. Okay? By the way, the hair and the clothing, things that the disease can cling to here. And if the scale spreads further in the skin after his cleansing, then the priest will look at him. And if the scale has spread in the skin, the priest does not need to look for the yellowish hair. He is unclean. Now notice, he pronounced him clean, and later on, what happened? He's not clean. It looked like he was okay, but later on, he looks at him again and goes, whoa, mistake here. Same thing with a Christian when you look at him saying, he seems to be okay, and later on, he's not okay. He's not okay. Verse 37, if in his sight that scale has remained, however, and the black hair has grown in it, and the scale has healed, he is clean. The priest will pronounce him clean. When a man or a woman has bright spots on the skin of their body, and the white bright spots, then the priest shall look. And if the bright spots on the skin of their bodies is a faint white, it's eczema. It's broken out on the skin. He's clean. Aren't you guys glad? If a man loses the hair on his head, he's bald, he's clean, it's okay. And if the head becomes bald and the front on the sides, he is bald on the forehead. He's still clean. But if the bald head and the bald forehead, there occurs a reddish white infection, it is leprosy breaking out on his bald head and on the bald forehead. Okay? By the way, don't forget, Israel, if they touch blood, even though the animals and skins, everything, wash your garment, wash your body, shave your body, that kind of thing like that. Washing was a big deal, right? Soap and water is a powerful thing, very powerful thing. And I remember years ago, I picked up this sack, and in this plastic sack, there was a broken blender. It was made of glass, and part of that had a glass hook on it. And I pulled it up against my body and went down my leg. It just put a big, long cut gash in my leg. And I went to the doctor. I thought, man, this is going to have to be stitches. That's a pretty good-sized gash. And he said, well, you want to, he said, you can just clean this with soap and water, right? I didn't know that at the time. Soap and water is a good cleanser, and you can just put a Band-Aid or some kind of wrap on it, but you can't be in a bath or a shower. So he said, I said, give me stitches. I'm going to shower. Anyway, so he stitched me up, etc. But in Israel, bathing, washing, is constant. Absolutely was constant, right? And soap is an incredibly good thing. Right. Now, the priest will look at him, and if it's swelling of that infection, I'm on verse 43, is reddish white, dark, really bright reddish white, and the bald head on his bald forehead, like the appearance of leprosy in the skin of his body. He's a leprous man, and he is unclean, and that priest will surely pronounce him unclean. His infection is on his head. Now notice, no fudging. If you're a priest, you will surely do this. You've got to do this, okay? Like in the New Testament, a sinning brother. You remove your sinning brother, you've got to do this. Got to do this. Because the leper who has that infection, his clothes will be torn, and the hair on his head will be uncovered, so people can see it, and he will cover up his mustache. How do you cover your mustache? Just like this, by covering your mouth. Okay? And he's going to cry, unclean, unclean, like Lord, Lord. Saying things twice in Hebrew is a way of giving emphasis. When somebody is coming near, you're going to cover you so literally the germs don't come out of your mouth towards them. Mm-hmm. You guys have seen the commercials and the different things where they show you with black lights and things how far a sneeze goes, right? You sneeze here and you just get everybody. Well, if it's leprosy, no, you can't do that. You'll kill everybody. Put your hand there and shout to that man, unclean, unclean. He's got to do this, right? He's got to have his head uncovered so people can actually see what's going on. And he shall remain unclean in his days in which he has his infection, because he is unclean. And he will live where? I'm sorry, but you're out, alone. His dwelling will be outside the camp. You cannot be among God's people. A little leaven leavens the whole lump, and a little bit of leprosy will kill everybody. And you'll have a plague on your hands. When a garment has the mark of leprosy in it, whether it is a wool garment or linen garment, or the warp is what straps to the little wooden structure, and the woof is the word that goes through it, and he's weaving. Okay? And so it can get in your cloth, the linen or the wool, whether is in leather. The word for leather is always the word skin. Whether in skin or any other article made of skin, like animal hides, etc. Okay, the word "made" here is the word for, like the name Malachi. It means a work or deed, or like an occupation. Okay, you've got something that made by a professional. If the mark is greenish or yellow, greenish yellow, or bright red in the garment or in the skin, or in the warp or in the woof, the strings coming down, the woof, the strings going across, or in any article of leather or skin, it is a leprous mark, and he shall be shown to the priest. The priest will look at the mark and shall quarantine the article, that garment, you can't take it home, and on the mark for 7 days. He will then look at the mark on the seventh day. If that mark has spread on the garment, whether in the warp or in the woof, up and down or left to right, on the leather, whether it is the purpose for which the leather is used, the mark is a leprous malignity. It is unclean. So he will burn it with that garment. Whether the warp or with the woof, in the wool or in the linen, or in any article of leather which marks occur. It is leprosy. It is malignant. It will be burned with fire. Okay. Now remember, leprosy in garments. The Bible was talking about the garments of a murderer, garments of violence, garments of praise, etc. Things. Right. Jude, towards the end of Jude, have mercy on some with fear, fearing even, he says, the garments that are stained by the flesh. You see the picture here? What stains his garment? His flesh. There's something in his flesh that has now come into his very garments. That would be, again, the pictures of leprosy. And when you're trying to share Christ with somebody or being merciful to somebody, you must despise that which is killing them, lest it kill you. And if the priest will look in verse 53, behold, that mark has not spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof or in the articles of the leather, then the priest will order them to wash the thing in which the mark occurs, and he will quarantine it for 7 days. The article with the mark has been washed, and that priest will look again. If the mark is not changed in its appearance, even though that mark has not spread, it is unclean. Nor shall you shall burn it with fire, whether an eating away has produced barrenness on the top or on the front of it. Okay, that is, this disease of leprosy is eating that garment, eating that piece of leather. Best get rid of that thing. Then the priest will look, and if that mark has faded after it has been washed, and he will tear it out of the garment and out of the leather, whether from the warp or from the woof, trying to spare the garment, etc. And if it appears again in that garment, whether in the warp or in the woof, in the article of the skin leather, it is an outbreak. The article with that mark shall be burned in the fire. And the garment, whether the warp or in the woof, or any article of leather with which that mark has departed, when you washed it, it shall then be washed a second time and shall be clean. Second time. We've all had things we've tried to clean, and one washing was not good enough. This is tough stuff here, okay? This is the law for the mark of leprosy in a garment of wool or linen, whether the warp or in the woof, and in any article of leather for pronouncing it clean or unclean. Now leprosy began, as far as historians know, in the land of Egypt. He brings them out, and he's going to say, let me show you how to deal with this, and you must take this seriously. What if we're not sure? Quarantine that product. He's not done about the walls in your house. It'll be the same like with the garments. If you find it in the plaster, you get the plaster out, and you can remove the rocks where that section is, put a hole in that wall, get that stuff out, see if you can spare that house, right? And you're going to quarantine the house and come back later. If it's spreading, tear it down. The whole house is turned. Now you can see in the scriptures, it's going to use those expressions of leprosy for men who are dead in their sins. I looked at that for myself, and that's okay. That was maybe before I met Christ. I was a walking dead man on my way to destruction, etc. He's going to use it that way in the Old Testament. He uses it that way in the New Testament. It's a very vivid description of a sinful man. Okay. Now notice, he's got to be alone. He can't be around anybody. And when he dies a second death, what's God going to do with him? He's going to go to judgment, and he will be alone forever. Because he contaminates everything and everybody. You can't be around. He contaminates everything. So in the New Testament, little leaven's the whole lump, so you're going to have to get it out. Okay? And if that's a sinful brother, that's the way it is. And like he told the priest, you're going to have to do this. This is not nice stuff, but you got to do it. It's for everybody else's house, nobody else gets killed. Okay? Let me ask you something. If the nicest leper, this is the nicest guy or the nicest guy you've ever known, and they've offered to come over and help you clean your house, are you going to accept them? What are they going to do to your house? The whole place will be a death camp, won't it? A death house. It'll kill everybody that comes in there. Okay? That being nice does not mean you're not a dead man. Okay? This stuff's in us, and it comes out in things that we do until we meet the Lord Jesus Christ. But even after we meet the Lord Jesus Christ, he says you're going to have to put the deeds of the flesh, and that the diseases of your flesh can contaminate the very garments, your way of life, and the things that you participate in, and it can infect others. It's always deadly. Father, thank you for this time. Leviticus is a A little drier book than most, but the realities taught in this book are real from Genesis to Revelation, all the way through. As we see Jesus dealing with lepers, we see others, and the king who thought he could offer up incense and was rebuked by the priests, and you struck him with leprosy in the head because he's demented in his brain, and he lived the rest of his life away from everybody as a leper. Father, all of us have been walking dead men until we have met the Son, met your Son. Lord, drag us to your Son. Lord Jesus, if you wanted to, you can make us clean. Thank you for telling that leper that you met that you want to make him clean. So make us clean as well. We love and praise you. In your name we pray. Amen.